discussion, stop recording afterwards to ensure that we continue the open and honest dialogue across your peers within DID. So with that, we'll get started. First, but before we get started, sorry, rewind. Slack. So the DID network does have a Slack channel. You guys should have all received an invitation specifically for the DID network. If not, I will put it in the chat. So again, if you are a part of the DID network, please feel free to join our Slack channel where you'll be able to engage with your peers, ask questions in a safe space that's just specifically for the DID network. We also share resources on that channel. So I will drop it in the chat before the end of this call. I'm gonna try to do it right now and multitask. But again, join us via Slack for sure. Perfect, so let's get started. So as we rise from challenges of 2020, from the obvious displays of social injustice witnessed by millions to the hardship and stresses of COVID-19, creating a sense of belonging is vital to an organization's culture, success, and employee engagement. Yet now that we live in this hybrid work environment, it has become one of the most challenging strategies to achieve. The Diversity in Design Collaborative aims to build a design industry that is inclusive and lifts the voices of talents and marginalized groups. Today, I'm accompanied here by dynamic Black leaders who are change makers within their respective workplaces and within their communities. As influential voices within the DID Collaborative, I'm so delighted to have them here with us today. And now I would like to pass it on to them for formal introductions. Please meet Sheri Crosby Wheeler.
Hi, everybody. Oh, I didn't know we were introducing ourselves. So I'll be really quick. I am Sheri Crosby Wheeler, and I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Fossil Group. I've been here for about a year and a half, helping to advance their D&I strategy forward. We already had one before I got here, but I'm just taking it a little further down the road. And so I do DEI work all day, every day, live, breathe, drink, eat it all the time. And I'm excited to be here with y'all today and share a little bit of my knowledge.
Awesome. Thanks, Sheri. Welcome. Chris Loper.
So, hey, everyone. Chris Loper, Production Operations Lead at Johnson & Johnson Design. I also lead a smaller collective within our studio called Diversity in Action. It's an initiative that came up around George Floyd times, and that was our connection to DID. Happy to be here.
And Candace.
Hi, Candace Charpentier. I'm a creative director with Freeman Company. Within my community, I serve on both my DEI town council and school committee. And I am honored to be here talking about what DID has done for me and how it's helped move my company along probably faster than it would have in the direction of inclusion and diversity.
Awesome. Thank you. And I just have to add, like, just hearing that is the power of DID, you know, just making sure that we're making the right steps intentionally within our respective organizations. So I'm excited for our DID members and also for the network to just continue to learn and just be a part of this work. So with that, let's just get started with our discussion. Exclusions can occur unintentionally within our workplace. We all know that. And sometimes we tend to exclude others because we have not considered how we might actively include them in the workplace. A simple example is a stream of photos of high-ranking white males within your workplace. These photos can unintentionally exclude women and underrepresented groups. So Sheri, can you share with us ways in which your organization can intentionally include others within the workplace?
There are lots and lots of ways. I mean, this question, I was just jotting down notes and I was like, wow, okay. And it's in ways that are big and ways that are small. And it's everybody. It's the people who lead people and the people who are individual contributors. Everybody can be thinking that way all the time. So for instance, in a meeting, the way that you include people, well, who's not here? What if it's a group that's meeting on a particular project, bring somebody in who is just a totally different voice, a totally different part of the business to add on a different perspective. So they don't have to be, someone that, oh, this is the group that always meets. It could be someone not connected to that group in a meeting when people are sharing ideas, making sure that there's not one person dominating the whole meeting, talking. We know those people, y'all. We know who they are. And I try not to do that, but they dominate meetings. So create space for other people to share their ideas too, because everybody that's there has something to share. And then when you're looking at things like who gets stretch assignments and things that will give them more visibility to leaders in the company to help them to move up. So it shouldn't always just go to that same person. If you lead people, don't always tap the person that is the one that like, oh, I know they can do it. There's some other people who can do it if you give them a chance. Maybe you have to help them a certain kind of way, but also tap. So those are a couple of ways. I have more, but I don't want to take up all the time. But those are a couple of ways I can think of just right off the bat that you can be inclusive in something. The last one, as simple as if you are going into the office, and I've had this happen before, and I'm like, really? And you are walking past someone to look away or to look down or look on your phone. Come on. You can look at them and say hello to let you know that literally and figuratively you see them, that there's somebody that is there in this space. You don't look past them, look around, you just say hello. And that's letting them know that they're seen, that they're there in the space. That's really small, but that's big. And I'll stop right there. I could keep going, but those are ways to intentionally include people of color and those people that you want to have that ascension in your organization.
Yep. Chris, anything?
Yeah, I think when we start talking about inclusivity, I start thinking about inclusive design immediately. So I'm thinking like, for the most part, if we're all thinking that way in the way we work, why would we not bring that into the way we actually act within our studios? The goal should be to make things work for everyone. And we should always be asking, what are we missing? And what could we be learning from others? So to have openness, to be able to bring others in within the studio who might not be in a certain category, if we're working in something, to bring them to the table. I think it's great. You're going to get so much out of it. And it's essentially part of the way we work. So at least on our side at JJD, yeah, it's important. Candace?
For me, it's what I thought of when you were talking is diversity shouldn't be performative, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't just say those things and then not represent that. And so sometimes it is taking that risk on a designer because their ideas are different, right? The ideas I'm coming to the table with, if you're letting me come to the table with my whole self, are gonna be different from a white male's idea. And maybe that's a little uncomfortable, but you only growing, you only know you're growing when you're uncomfortable.
Right.
So, maybe taking ideas of people who don't look like you and helping to grow those will only help grow your company.
Yeah. Have you guys experienced like how exclusion manifests itself within the design industry? And if so, can you share examples of how you may have personally overcome it, or how you've witnessed another leader or organization overcome those exclusions?
I know for me, like it's been a longer road than the white male counterparts that came in at the same time as me. And I followed the same rules that my parents followed: work harder, work longer. But the doors didn't seem to open up as fast. Also because I wasn't always having the opportunity to network. Our office would have Thursdays where mostly the men would be able to go out for drinks after work, and the rest of us were kind of left, we have to run home and pick up our kids. So it was like an exclusion where they didn't think they were excluding us because they invited us. We just couldn't come.
Yeah, I think when you said that, I was thinking of like the idea of the cultural fit, the community. Is there something going on? Does it really feel like I'm actually invited to that? Is it something that I would enjoy? How open, how accessible is this event for me to connect and network? And I've run into that quite a bit, I think, in my past. And yeah, it puts you in a place where you're maybe out of your comfort zone, which can be a positive. But at the end of the day, if you're really trying to make something inclusive, you should try to make sure there's something for everyone to take part in. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So just because you're invited doesn't mean you're comfortable.
No. And that's the inviting to the table versus being, you know, at someone else's table or someone sharing the table with you. That invite is a little weird.
And it seems to me in that, no, go Candace.
No,
You
no,
go.
no.
No, you, because you know about this better than me.
Well,
So-
here's something interesting that came out of COVID is that they worked really hard to find ways to get people together again, because we're not in our offices entirely remote all across the country, even in we're in other countries as well. And one of the things they came up with was a design hang time. And it's a open space. We do it once a month. And the greatest thing is it's run by a Black woman. And she puts together the best events. And they are so inclusive. They're cooking classes where one week we're learning to make shrimp and grits. And the next week we're learning to make pumpkin pie. And we're learning to make drinks because she brings in bartenders. And we're, doing trivia about just about everything. And because it's something that's a drop-in and it's open to everyone and it's during the office hours, it's become such a great network for all of us to connect. So it was like a simple fix that came out of, a time of how do we connect with others better.
Sheri?
No, I was just going to say from the example that Candace gave, I think, maybe the people who put the Thirsty Thursday together, that's some kind of name, ain't it? Thirsty means many different things, and culturally, thirsty means some other stuff. But anyway, and so the people who put that together probably thought, oh no, well, everybody's invited, like you were saying, like, oh no, you're welcome to come. It's open to anybody, never seeing like, okay, well, is it the same people that are coming all the time? And kind of doing that inquiry. Doing that inquiry, somebody internally saying, well, why is it the same people? And are we just going to shrug our shoulders and be like, well, it's the same people. These are the only people who want to come. So what? Or be like, no, what could it be? Let me ask someone and see why they're not able to come so that then we can do something additional or change it a little bit to have more people be included. But I think sometimes people are like, well, I put the invitation out there. They don't want to come. They don't want to come. And never go past that and not do the inquiry that it takes to find out how can we make this more inclusive.
Yeah. I love the point that all of you made, but what stuck out to me was when Chris said sharing the table. And I know you guys talk about sponsorship within your working groups and how important it is to not only bring them, but make sure that you're sharing them, sharing that wealth, that knowledge, those opportunities with your peers and counterparts. So we're going to shift a little bit and talk a little bit about happiness and belonging in the workplace. So we obviously know that that is extremely important to an organization's success. I know we're all smiling on this call, and we hope that you're smiling 9 to 5, 24/7 in your workplaces also. We obviously know that happier employees create better productivity rates, retention rates, creates more sales or higher quality of work within the workplace. So Chris, can you tell us a little bit about how in Johnson & Johnson, how do you track and measure such goals such as happiness and belonging? And what are some best practices that you guys have put in place?
Okay. We're a big company, Johnson & Johnson. But one thing that I think that they've done really well is from the very beginning, we have something called the credo, our credo. And our credo starts with our doctors, our nurses, our patients, our consumers. But number 2 is our employees. It's 4 parts. Thereafter, it goes to our communities. It goes to our shareholders as 4. So that's our hierarchy. Number 2, very easy. Our employees, making sure that they are happy, that they belong. And one thing that we do every other year, we have surveys that go out. for our credo, just to make sure that we are still attaining that, following our credo. And then the other thing is our voice. Our voice survey connects with our employees, open and honest conversations where they're giving feedback about what we are doing great at, what we need to maybe be a little bit better on. And that gives our leadership a year to make that change, make that adjustment. And it's a constant feedback loop to say, okay, how are we doing? What can we do better? It's a constant, thing that we're always working on. We're measuring that. And this goes across from the top all the way down. It goes within, it connects with our goals. But ultimately, it's something that I think allows for the employees to feel comfortable and confident that I think our feelings and how we are aligned to our credo and how we are doing is actually seen and actually observed. So that's one thing that's really great. I don't know how to mimic that in smaller scale, but I think at least communicating, trying to keep those open and honest conversations with employees to understand if things aren't great. What can we do better? How can we get to that happy point? How can we make someone belong? I think that's the goal of any leadership in an organization.
And those surveys, are they conducted by a third party or conducted internally?
They're internally, but they're also reviewed through a third party. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Candace or Sheri, anything to add?
I'll jump in real quick. We have the same type of survey at Fossil, and I think we do them every other year as well. And it is conducted by a third party. And then when the results come out, and that's why, like Chris said, there's a challenge if you have a smaller organization, because you don't, if a leader has less than 5 people on their team, they don't get their results, because you don't want to be able to point to like, because some leaders, we all want all the leaders to be right and do right. That doesn't always happen. So some leaders might be like, oh, I know it's so-and-so, they're not happy, and they're down this rabbit trail of ridiculousness. So I think another thing that can be done is if you have, I don't know if it's your HR team or if it's somebody outside of HR, but you have to build that level of trust and then create spaces for people to be able to give feedback. So if it's not a survey, if your organization is not that large, then maybe it's, who does or who do the employees trust? And I mean, for real, like create the psychological safety so that people will actually share, because they're not going to share if they think that there's going to be blowback from giving their real feelings. People will not. And, it's funny when you're asking the question about happiness and belonging, I'm like, can you really be super happy at work? Now I'm getting all philosophical. I don't know. I mean, and can you really just, sometimes we're not happy, but for the most part, you want to try to be happier versus not. With respect to belonging, that's not something that just is, that's something that inclusion creates. And inclusion, the way that you create inclusion is you have to do an action. So people who are walking around like, oh yeah, I'm inclusive. I'm like, really? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are the concrete things that you're doing to be inclusive?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the test that each individual, and in particular, people leaders, people who lead teams, because they are privileged to do so, need to ask themselves. Now, oh yeah, I'm inclusive in what ways? How? In mentoring, in sponsorship, in meetings, in who gets projects, in picking out high potentials, and who gets to go to events. In what ways are you inclusive in that? So that then if you're doing that and you're focused on that, your team members and employees, they start to feel like they belong. And also they get an opportunity. If they're given that opportunity in that space to share and they don't get this blowback, that's where you're going to create that trust and that psychological safety and really get to the meat of like, what do we need to be doing?
Yeah, I love the sense of like, not challenging, but challenging in a good way, right? Of like making sure we ask the right questions. Sometimes we feel like, well, you must be this large corporation, you must be doing it right, or you must have all the answers, and that's not necessarily true. So yeah, definitely creating a space where even if you're interviewing, that you definitely ask those questions and ensure that your employees feel comfortable in having that open dialogue back and forth. It's productive, right? It's a productive conversation. Candace?
All the other companies, my company does do a survey, and on the other side of that survey, as a designer, we don't always fill them out. Sometimes they get lost in the emails. But again, they do make the effort. But one of the things that has happened over the past year, again, since coming back from COVID and our company going almost entirely remote, is an effort to make those connections. So every week we have a one-on-one with our direct leader or head of our design department. And it's just a half hour to talk about anything, the news, what's going on, to complain. It's just an open office hours. And then once a week we have a meeting with our team and just kind of, 7 people and just chat about, oh, I'm working on this, how about this idea, So it's strange how COVID separated us, but brought us closer together.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's true. Like, our surveying is only as good as the response rate. So I'm glad to hear that there's different ways that we can definitely engage with our employees. Moving on to vulnerability, which is a very difficult and sensitive topic, right? We all know, Sheri's like, no, it's super hard to be vulnerable at work. I know personally, I think within the last 2 years, I have been able to show up as my true self, right? Or my authentic self at work. And, being vulnerable is not something that comes easy, because we were taught, or we were told, that you should just leave all your personal baggage at home, and that's not for the office, right? So how can you share with us, how does vulnerability in the design workplace look like? I'm gonna go to Candace first.
Yeah, that is a hard one, because it really asks you to open yourself up. So a year or two ago, the idea of opening up and sharing how lonely it can be as a Black female designer amongst a sea of mostly white males was unthinkable. But not seeing someone who looks like you, who hurts like you, especially on those days where on the news you hear another unarmed Black man being shot. And it can be incredibly isolating. And I know creating a professional environment where we all can be vulnerable, especially about race, can be really challenging. For me, it was when Freeman decided to join DID, because it let me know that they saw me and that they understood the systemic racism involved in all aspects, but especially in design. And by opening up that door, they've kind of allowed me to kind of flourish and talk about what it's like. They've given me that space because I've been comfortable in that space because I know I have the support of all these amazing people and a team of people who are in team of companies who are striving towards the same goal of having everyone feel included and heard and welcomed. Sorry.
Okay. Sheri, Chris.
You're not coming to me. Chris, you better go.
I'll say this. Our studio really does. I think I feel like we have learned vulnerability and to like really connect through COVID. What came to mind was vulnerability is the best measure of courage. Vulnerability, you build empathy. Designers, that's our bread and butter, empathy, right? And so valuing that kind of input, that perspective of others, even in our own community and within our studio, that's very important, because once we start to learn one another, once we start to get comfortable with one another, we can kind of share those spaces and understand one another better. We work better together. It's a fact. It works so much better. And we all came through this together, through COVID, through George Floyd, and we came out stronger from that. And so to me, we have to be vulnerable. We have to cry together a little bit. We have to laugh together. We were all on video, looking across from one another, seeing each other's homes, seeing our kids and people, our family members. And there's something great in that. There's really something great in that. And I think for such a bad things to happen, I think that there should be some good that comes from that. And so if you haven't done that in your studio, if you haven't had those conversations, if you haven't gotten vulnerable with your, colleagues, do it. Connect with them. It's important.
I'm about to cry.
I know it's a lot, right?
If I could
Yeah.
just hug everyone on the screen.
Can I say
and this
something?
is vulnerability.
It is.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. I wanted to say to, and I know I'm going back and it might be beating a dead horse, but it's so important to create the space and create the real space where people can really share, because there are people walking around in workplaces that are just sometimes hanging on by a thread. A couple of weeks ago, so we just started employee resource groups here at Fossil, and I was sitting in on a meeting. We touch base with them every month, like, what are you doing? What are you working on? And it just so happens that our Black employee resource group is led by 3 Black women. So we're in there, we're going through, business of the day, and I heard it. I kind of heard one of the leaders, and she was like, "Yeah, today it just," and I was like, "Okay," but you could tell a little bit she wanted to go past it, and then it came up again, and she was like, "I just," and I was like, "Let's stop." And she was about to talk about it, and she began to cry, and I was like, "We don't have to keep going with this meeting, like let's just stop right now and let's talk through what might be happening." And then the other lady who was one of the leaders, she's like, "It's okay." She said, "Sometimes on my team, I'm raising my hand like, look, I'm here. I'm here. Do you see me? Do you see what's going on?" She's like, she felt like she had to try to get people's attentions, meetings scheduled without her, projects happening without her. She's left off of things. And she was like, "I feel like I'm always raising my hand saying, hey, I'm here, I'm here." So we had a moment, and it was because they felt like it was a safe space. And man, if we could amplify that, because you just don't know what the ways that they're feeling, maybe exclusion or what's happening, or how, leaders are coming off. So you have to be in tune to those around you. You have to be thoughtful and paying attention. We could have kept going with that meeting. Like, we have something to do, or no, you're not supposed to cry. I was like, no, we're stopping this meeting right now. And we're gonna, let her know we're here for you. Yeah, I was crying. I was like, man, I'm crying at work, but I've been crying at work for like the past 2-3 years. So whatever. I'm like, it's happening now, and that's vulnerability. But if you don't create that space, there's somebody sitting there just on the edge, and you don't know. I don't think any of us want that to be the case for anybody that we work with. So we want to create a space that they can let it go. Sometimes you got to release it. And I was happy that day we could be a release valve. And later on that day, I checked on her. "Hey, are you okay?" Because it was on my mind all day. She was like, "Yeah, and thank you so much for it." But you have to be in tune with employees around you. You have to be in tune, in particular, your employees that are underrepresented. And in most cases, that's that's Black employees. And so you just have to be in tune if you care to. There's some people out there. I know y'all on this call, y'all do care because you're on this call. There's some people out there that they don't, and I'm not talking to them, but I know y'all care. So just be in tune.
Yeah, I think it's important how being inclusive or creating a culture of belonging really depends on it's simple. It's just treating people like humans, right? We're all humans. We all have personal lives, children, responsibilities, etc. And making sure that we have empathy, right, with our peers and colleagues, and a sense of understanding. Like, at the end of the day, we're just human beings at work with a whole lot of other stuff going on, right? And this is just one layer, one aspect of our lives.
But sometimes the stuff going on is at work. Let's not get it twisted.
That's true.
Like, it's not always the external
Correct.
stuff. Sometimes it's at work, it's people you're dealing with, it's colleagues, it's teams. And so we have to be aware of that too. And that's what could be weighing. And so then you layer the work And next thing you know, sometimes people will crack. And so I tell, a lot of DEI practitioners who practice by themselves in companies, putting on the mantle of all this work. I'm like, hey, if you need to hit 911, I will drop everything. Like, let me finish this meeting and go talk to this person, because you need it. You need that release valve.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think too, it becomes easier when leadership shares and comes with that vulnerability. When they're able to share, I know even as a designer, when someone shares a story of just failing with a campaign, or just because sometimes you just beat yourself as an individual, beat yourself up about the work that you put out, and you want people to love it, and then you have that extra added weight, as Sheri mentioned, of also being Black and having to work as hard, and your failures are, you fail harder than your white counterparts. Okay, your fall is a lot further than theirs. So having someone share those and say, I've been there, it's okay, let's learn from it, how do we get better from it, and just be with you in the trenches rather than to kind of look down at you from the top.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because as a Black professional, your failure is not your own. And that's why it weighs so heavy on us. It's your failure is like, oh man, now the next person that comes after me is not going to get the benefit of the doubt, or they're not going to get the opportunity because I failed. It shouldn't be that way. That is how it is though, because somebody's sitting over there saying, well, we let so and so, we gave them a chance and they messed up. So now never anymore do any Black people get a chance. It's like, no, that failure, and you have to fail to succeed, but that failure is only that individual. It's not every person, but that's not the case as it pertains to Black professionals. So that's not the way it's seen.
Right. All right. Well, that ends our discussion. I'm going to stop recording. Thank you guys so much for being open, honest, and